So there's a very good piece in the New Statement basically dismantling David Davis's delusional state on Brexit, and it sounds like an absolute fantasy land. So let's begin on what this actually means. So it starts off like this. The headline of the title was, "How will we deliver the best Brexit in 2018?" So the New Statement responds like this. The wild optimism of this piece is summed up in the headline. Yes, Brexit talks are set to finish in October in order to deliver the draft final deal in time. But 2018 does not mean the end of it all. For example, the EU could decide that the transitional period isn't long enough and vote to extend it, although this is unlikely. And the EU has suggested it could take up to 2020 to decide trade terms. So the first paragraph, we continue on with David Davis's delusions. In December, we reached an important milestone in Britain's negotiations to leave the EU. So what happens next? The response to this is, hang on, Mr. Davis, you can't get away with it that easily. Let's think about that important milestone. It's a reference to phase 1 of the negotiations being tackled, including settling the Brexit bill, setting out the rights of EU citizens in the UK and vice versa, and the Irish border question, which was agreed by both sides, who decided they could move on to the second phase. But it was Davis himself who angered Ireland and the EU by claiming this agreement was more a statement of intent than it was a legally enforceable thing. After it was reached and then he had to scramble back to win back their trust, telling Guy Vornestadt, let's work together to get it converted into legal text as soon as possible. And the Irish border question still remains. The agreement is fudged. It tries to guarantee a no-hard border by saying that it will reach a trade deal to make this happen, but it doesn't say how. Instead, it just states that if it can't do this, the UK will propose specific solutions to address the unique circumstances of the island of Ireland. After the deal was done, Theresa May reiterated specific solutions to what were the unique circumstances of Northern Ireland would still need to be found, and still we hear nothing on this. So this important milestone that Davis is claiming, it's nothing more than a giant millstone around the government's neck. So he continues. On the transition deal, a period of around 2 years in the economic interests of both sides, meaning agreement by March is doable. A New Statement's reply is, 2 years will not be enough time to sort out a bespoke trade agreement with the EU. It took the EU and Canada 7 years to come up with a free trade deal. Davis himself wants a more extensive trade deal. So essentially he wants the Canadian deal plus plus plus. And as the EU have said, you can't pick and choose. Expect them to hold on that. Anyway, it continues. And Davis has been even more optimistic than this. There was a time when he didn't think a transitional deal was needed at all. In December 2016, he believed that a trade deal could be done within the Article 50 time period, i.e. before March 2019. So, Davis continues. Workers' rights and animal welfare, whether it's the Prime Minister commitments to workers' rights or Michael Gove's determination to uphold animal welfare standards, this government believes that the UK's future lies in a race to the top in global standards. And yet this denies what's been going on in Parliament, because Brexit ministers have been urging May to scrap the EU Working Time Directive. something that will negatively affect workers' rights. And although the Cabinet has been fairly insistent on upholding food standards following the chlorinated chicken row, when ministers suggested they wouldn't rule out imports of chicken washed in chlorine, the House of Lords Subcommittee on EU Energy and Environment found last year that animal welfare standards would be could be threatened if farmers come under pressure from an influx of cheap imports from outside the EU. So Davis continues. The trade deal. We start from a uniquely trusted position, closer than Canada or Japan, bigger than Norway, and more deeply integrated from energy networks to services than any other trade partner. The size of a country and proximity, and its proximity to the EU, has nothing to do with the quality of a trade deal it can secure. What matters is how much control it is willing to concede, and it is worthwhile conceding for a close relationship with the bloc. As Davis writes in this article, he wants to take control of our borders, our money and our laws, a level of sovereignty that will come with a price in terms of its deal with the EU. Indeed, Michael Barnier says that Britain can only hope for a Canadian-style deal, i.e. poorer access to markets, if it's willing to water down its red lines on free movement or the European Court of Justice. And as for after boasting about the UK's degree of integration, isn't that just an argument for being a member of the EU in the first place? So this is where Davis refers to the financial services. Given the strength and breadth of our links, a deal which took in some areas of our economic relationship but not others would be the favoured phrase of EU diplomats, cherry picking. This is Davis taking a pop at Barnier. Although Britain could be allowed a deal on its financial services rather than a Canadian-style agreement that applies mainly to goods rather than services, Barnier has announced that there can't be a special allowances for the city if the UK insists on leaving the single market. Anyway, Davis continues, my objective is that services can be traded across borders from highly regulated sectors like financial services to modern ones such as artificial intelligence. This is wishful thinking on Davis's part. He is essentially asking to pick and choose which of the EU's 4 freedoms of goods, services, labour and capital Britain will follow. Angela Merkel has repeatedly insisted that the UK must observe all 4 of these principles if it wants the same quality of access to the EU's markets. So now we move on to talking about Phase 2. But yeah, this is just absolutely insane. Davis has written a complete fancy piece, and again, when he talks about Phase 2, the negotiations about the future will not be straightforward. They will generate the same public thunder and lightning that we have seen in the past year, and at least he's right on that. And hopefully, the public might come to realise, yeah, this isn't quite a good thing that's going on. Remember, you've got Grimsby, one of the highest towns to vote leave, is now trying to argue that it wants special status. Basically saying, yeah, we want to be in the single market and have everything else in all but name, essentially. So, yeah, welcome to Britain, where it's a complete fancy land.